On the night of March 12, 1977, 9 loggers drifted out of a tavern on the Timberline Ridge and into the cold spine of the Appalachian forest. By dawn, every one of them had vanished across less than a mile of frozen ground, a disappearance so precise, so unnerving, that state authorities later called it an impossible rural incident. Locals never used that phrase. They called it something far older, the Appalachian Massacre. The truth didn't involve moonshiners, outlaws, or any mountain militia. It began with a single joke, a cruel insult thrown in the wrong tavern at the wrong family, a family small in stature, silent in nature, and bound by rules the mountains themselves seemed to respect. What unfolded next was not warfare, not revenge as most understand it, but a night the forest closed around 9 men and never returned them. But before we continue with the video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. March 12th, 1977. A cold front had rolled down the spine of the Appalachians like a slow, deliberate hand, pressing frost into the dirt roads and leaving a thin, silver glaze on the windows of Timberline Tavern. Inside, bourbon lamps flickered against knotty pine walls, and the air carried that familiar mix of wet boots, cigarette haze, and stories better left unsaid. 9 men sat crowded around a long, scarred table, loud enough to make the floorboards complain. They were loggers from the Western Ridge, half drunk, half bored, and fully confident that nothing in that isolated corner of the mountains could touch them. They didn't notice the Rowan family enter. Nobody ever did, not until it was too late. The Rowan brothers were small in stature, each barely over 4 feet tall, bundled in heavy work jackets stained with the red dust of the old mines. Their sister, Mercy Rowan, walked slightly ahead, carrying a wool satchel and a quiet presence that made strangers step aside without understanding why. The Rowan parents trailed behind, weathered faces carved by wind and years of silent endurance. They moved through the tavern like a single shadow, compact and unassuming, as if they had mastered the art of existing without drawing fire. The 9 men glanced over, once, then continued laughing. That was their first mistake. The second came seconds later, wrapped inside a joke delivered by the tallest man at the table, Clay Murdoch. He slammed his mug and shouted something that ripped through the tavern, a cheap, cruel one-liner about short folks needing ladders just to reach their own anger. The table roared with laughter. Chairs scraped. Someone whistled. Another slapped his knee. But the Rowan family didn't move. Not a smile, not a twitch, not even a flinch. Only Mercy Rowan lifted her head. Only she heard what the men didn't. The click of something ancient inside her family. A mechanism older than the mines, older than those mountains, older than humiliation itself. Her eyes tracked each of the men as if taking inventory. Their faces, their boots, the calluses on their hands, the direction of the nearest exit. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her brothers, Jeb, Elias, and Ruthven, straightened almost imperceptibly. Their father exhaled once, slow, controlled. Their mother closed her eyes. Whatever sparked inside them wasn't rage. Rage is loud, sloppy, and hot. This was something colder, older, calculated, something that didn't start tonight, only woke up. The tavern owner sensed it first. He stepped back behind the counter. He had seen the Rowan men with pickaxes, and he knew how they moved. Not fast, but deliberate, precise, patient. The kind of patience that doesn't quiver under threat. The kind that waits for the right terrain. Clay Murdoch noticed their stillness and grinned wide, mistaking silence for fear. "You folks hear me down there?" he shouted. The table exploded in laughter again. That was the moment the chorus cut short, when Mercy Rowan finally spoke. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It didn't tremble. It simply sliced clean through the noise. "We heard you." Every man at the table froze. Something in the way she said it forced them to turn. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its hum. Mercy stepped closer, just enough for the men to see her face in the amber light. Calm, unreadable, steady as bedrock. She wasn't asking for an apology. She wasn't demanding anything. She was marking them. The 9 men exchanged glances, confused at first, then irritated, and finally uneasy. They sensed something had shifted, but none of them understood how deeply. Clay Murdoch tried to laugh it off, but the sound echoed strangely, as if the tavern walls rejected it. Mercy Rowan leaned in just enough for him to hear the words, meant only for him. "Leave, now." The room inhaled all at once. Clay forced a smirk, trying to pull authority back into his chest. "Or what?" Mercy stepped aside. Behind her, the Rowan brothers stood perfectly still, but something in their posture had changed. They weren't looking at the men anymore. They were looking at the door, at the forest, at the darkness waiting beyond. Clay swallowed. He didn't know why. When the men finally shoved back their chairs, muttering curses, the tavern owner didn't stop them. He didn't warn them. He knew better than to intervene in matters that belonged to the mountain. The Rowan family remained in place, heads slightly tilted, listening not to the boots stomping out the door, but to the rhythm of fear in each step. When the door shut, the tavern fell into a silence thick enough to choke on. Mercy Rowan placed a few bills on the counter, nodded to the owner, and walked out. Her family followed without a single word. Nobody inside dared breathe until the last Rowan disappeared into the cold. Outside, the forest absorbed the 9 men like a mouth closing. The trail that led downhill forked twice, then split again, thinning into shadows. The men joked at first about dwarf temper tantrums, but their voices cracked against the wind. Their silhouettes grew smaller as they descended. At the crest of the ridge, the Rowan family paused. Jeb Rowan knelt and pressed 2 fingers into the soil. Elias adjusted the straps on his boots. Ruthven scanned the tree line. Their parents waited with the stillness of stone guardians. Mercy Rowan tightened her gloves. No lanterns, no dogs, no shouts. No haste, only a family stepping into the woods as if returning to a language they had spoken long before they ever learned words. The hunt began the moment the Rowans disappeared beneath the pines, and the mountain, old, patient, hungry, closed behind them. By the time the 9 men staggered halfway down the ridge, the cold had sharpened enough to sting their throats. Their laughter had thinned into restless mutters, each voice breaking against the crunch of frozen leaves. Clay Murdoch led the group with forced bravado, kicking branches aside, trying to drown out the quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a man feel watched, even when nothing moves. The timberline forest had a way of swallowing sound. Tonight, it swallowed confidence too. The men weren't afraid yet, not truly, but something gnawed at them. Something about the way the Rowan family had stared at the door instead of at them. Something about Mercy Rowan's voice. Not angry, not pleading, but final. Clay tried to remind himself that they were just a family of miners, people of small build who worked in the dark and kept to themselves. But the guiltless part of his mind whispered, then why did the tavern owner step back like he'd seen this before? A sharp crack echoed overhead, a branch snapping. The men flinched, then laughed nervously when they realized it was only the weight of ice. They quickened their pace. They wanted distance, warm beds, anything that wasn't the memory of 8 motionless faces under the bourbon lights. They won't follow, Clay muttered, but no one answered. The forest knew better. A mile uphill, the Rowan family moved without a whisper. Jeb Rowan took the lead, his steps precise, deliberate, reading the forest floor like a page written for him alone. Elias walked just behind, eyes trained on the faint disturbances the men had left. A scuff of mud, a snapped twig, a patch of pine needles brushed the wrong direction. Ruthven drifted along the flank, melting in and out of the tree line as if born from it. Their parents brought up the rear, steady, silent, unhurried. The mother carried a leather pouch. The father held nothing, not even a blade, just the gravity of someone who had stepped into this darkness many times before. Mercy Rowan was the only one who looked upward. She watched the sky through the lattice of branches, measuring the hour, reading the weight of the air. Every few steps she stopped to listen. Not for the men, their bumbling trail was easy to follow, but for the mountain itself. Some say the forest changes shape at night, that paths slip, that echoes drift in circles. Mercy knew those truths better than most, and she knew the 9 men were already losing their way. Downhill, the group reached a narrow ravine, a place locals avoided after dark. The temperature dipped sharply, as if the ground were exhaling cold from somewhere deep beneath. Clay hesitated. He didn't want to admit he didn't recognize this part of the forest, but the truth pressed against his ribs. "Did we take a wrong turn?" one man asked. Clay snapped. "There is no wrong turn. This ridge is straight." But the ridge wasn't straight. Not at night. Not in timberline. When the men climbed the opposite slope, their lantern beam landed on something that made their breath catch. Footprints. Small ones. Precise. Fresh. Leading sideways across the hill instead of downhill. "Kids?" another man whispered. But nobody in the mountains let kids wander this forest at night. Everyone knew that. Clay tightened his jaw. "They're just—" He didn't finish the sentence, because the prints ended abruptly at the base of a fallen log and did not continue on the other side, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. A dark shiver slid through the men. The forest felt colder now. Too cold for march, too cold for breath. They didn't know it, but the Rowan family was already above them, watching from a ridge the men couldn't see. Mercy rested her palm on a pine trunk. "Not yet," she whispered. Her brothers nodded. This wasn't improvisation. It was sequence. The men advanced another quarter-mile before the first sign reached them. A sound, a rhythmic tapping, soft, distant, hollow. Tap, tap, tap. Tap. They froze. Woodpecker? One man asked, but the pattern repeated too evenly, too deliberately. Clay scanned the shadows, lantern trembling in his grip. Probably just, he began. The tapping stopped. Silence poured in like water filling a basin. Then something brushed through the trees behind them. Light, fast, almost playful. The men spun around. Their lantern beam caught only drifting snow crystals. The sound came again. Tap, 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 tap. But this time from the right, then the left, then ahead. The rhythm encircled them. They didn't know the Rowan brothers used tapping in the mines to communicate without speaking. They didn't know those rhythms were codes. They didn't know those codes traveled far in the forest at night. They only knew something intelligent was moving around them, something that wasn't afraid of them at all. Clay's voice fell to a whisper. Keep moving. They did, but faster now, stumbling, their boots clumsy on the uneven slope. The tapping followed them, weaving through the trees like a message they weren't meant to understand. Behind them, the Rowan family reached the ravine. Jeb pressed 2 fingers to the soil again. Elias noted the direction of the boot prints. Ruthven knelt to inspect the lantern soot on a branch. They didn't smile. They didn't rush. They only shared a single understanding glance. Mercy spoke softly. They're starting to hear us. The father rested a hand on her shoulder. The mountain decides when. Mercy exhaled, long and steady. Then the Rowan family slipped deeper into the forest, closing the distance one quiet, coordinated step at a time. The 9 men below walked faster, but the forest had already chosen its side. By the time the 9 men reached the upper flats of the ridge, the forest had changed. The trees stood closer together, their trunks rising like pillars in a cathedral built from darkness itself. The wind shifted, no longer sweeping through the branches but weaving between them, carrying faint, broken sounds that made the men stop more than once just to listen. No one admitted it, but each of them sensed the same quiet truth. They were no longer choosing their direction. The forest was choosing it for them. Clay Murdoch tried to regain the image of a leader. He lifted his lantern higher, widening the ring of orange light around them, but every movement felt heavier, as if something unseen pressed down on his shoulders. He could hear the men breathing behind him, short, jittery breaths of people fighting the urge to run. "Stay close," he whispered. They already were, closer than they had ever walked before. A sudden gust pushed through the pines, snapping twigs and scattering needles like rain. When the wind died, a single sound remained, a soft scrape, like a boot, sliding deliberately across bark. The men whipped their heads toward the noise, but nothing stood there, only the sense of presence, a weight in the dark. Half a mile behind them, the Rowan family paused at the crest of a narrow overlook. From there, they could see the flickering lantern glow far below, bobbing unsteadily through the trees. Jeb Rowan knelt, pressing his ear to the ground. He listened not for footsteps, but for vibration, the way miners listen for shifts in the earth. Elias studied the line of broken branches overhead, mapping the men's path through the canopy of signs. Ruthven moved off to the side, collecting something from the base of a cedar, dry moss, brittle twigs, and a stone with a streak of iron across it. Their father took them in with a slow nod. "You have their pace." He wasn't asking, he was confirming. Mercy Rowan stepped forward, boots sinking into the frost-laced soil. She closed her eyes, letting the cold, damp air fill her lungs. Every breath carried the scent of pine resin, earth rot, and the metallic hint of snow waiting to fall. "The ridge will bend them," she murmured. Her mother, silent until then, slipped a hand into the leather pouch and withdrew a thin strip of red cloth. She tied it around Mercy's wrist, pulling the knot tight. Mercy didn't look down. The ritual was old, simple and unspoken, a reminder. Once the cloth was tied, the path wasn't meant to be reversed. Mercy lifted her gaze toward the scattering lantern light. "They're tiring. They will tire faster," her father said. "Fear weighs more than tools." The Rowan brothers exchanged no words, only a shared breath of agreement. Then the family descended the overlook, fanning out with practiced precision. One straight ahead, one to the right, one to the left, 2 behind. They moved like segments of a single organism, each performing a role learned in tunnels that punished hesitation. In the forest below, the lantern beam wavered again. The 9 men pushed through a narrow corridor of pines, their boots crunching on frozen needles. None of them dared to look behind them anymore, though every nerve insisted something was there, just beyond the fringe of light. It began with a whisper, a thin sliding sound across the ground. Clay stopped instantly. What was that? No one answered. Their faces had drained of color, their breaths puffing in the cold. The whisper came again, this time from their left, then from their right. Leaves shifting, brush being parted. soft, deliberate steps that paused whenever the men did. Clay raised the lantern higher. His hand shook so violently the flame bent sideways. A figure appeared just inside the light's reach, small, still, half-hidden. A Rowan brother. The men froze. But before anyone could speak, the figure stepped back into the darkness, dissolving into the trees as if absorbed by them. Clay's chest tightened. "They're following us." Another man muttered, "No, they're hurting us." The words dropped like a stone into their stomachs. Up the ridge, Mercy Rowan moved along the higher contour, matching the men's pace without making a sound. Her brothers shadowed her from different angles, each using techniques learned from the abandoned mining tunnels, staying in pockets of darkness, shifting weight on the outer edges of the foot, avoiding brittle ground. The Rowan father paused at a great fallen spruce. He ran his hand along the bark, then leaned close to the earth. A faint tremor hummed under his palm. Footsteps, frantic ones, a pattern that told him the men had begun tripping over roots. "They're weakening," he whispered. The mother joined him, her eyes scanning the frost ahead. "Then it's time." She withdrew another red cloth from the pouch and tied it to a low branch, letting it flutter softly. The wind carried the faintest chime of thread against bark, a signal understood only by her children. Below, the 9 men reached a clearing, a rare open space where the ground flattened beneath a high canopy. Clay exhaled with relief. "We'll rest here," he said, but even as he said it, he knew the idea was foolish. None of them would sleep. None of them would sit. They remained standing, huddled, eyes hunting the tree line. One of the men, Royce Turner, stepped backward, squinting into the dark. "I heard something," he muttered. Clay didn't bother to ask what. They had all been hearing something for the past hour. Then it came again. The tapping, but slower now. Measured, almost counting. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike echoed across the clearing, bouncing off the frozen trunks, building a rhythm that made the air feel tight. Royce spun toward the sound. "Who's there?" No answer, just the tapping. Steady, patient. Clay's breath fogged in front of him. "They're close." A second rhythm joined the first. Identical tapping from the opposite side of the clearing. Then a third, farther back. Then a fourth, perfectly spaced. The Rowans had encircled them. They weren't hiding anymore. They were establishing positions. The men stood trapped inside a ring of invisible watchers. Suddenly, the tapping ceased. Silence fell like a curtain. Then, from somewhere behind the trees, Mercy Rowan whispered, not loud, not harsh, but far too close. "Keep running." Clay spun, lantern trembling violently, but he saw nothing. Only the empty clearing. Only the darkness waiting for their next step. The clearing emptied as fast as a kicked anthill. Clay Murdoch didn't shout an order. He didn't have to. The 9 men exploded into motion the instant Mercy Rowan's whisper brushed their ears, scattering into the nearest corridors of trees. Lantern light slashed across trunks and branches as they ran, stumbling, pushing, gasping. Some tripped, others cursed. No one dared look back, but the forest looked back at them. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if every step pulled them deeper into a place the mountain had sealed off from the world. Clay forced his legs to move faster, ignoring the burn in his lungs. The tapping had vanished, but its echo pulsed inside him like a second heartbeat. Ahead, the path narrowed between 2 jagged outcrops, a tight squeeze, one at a time. Clay pushed through first, scraping his coat against the rock. The others funneled after him, panting, shivering, muttering about shadows that seemed to bend. When the last man slipped through, something snapped behind them. Not a twig, a branch, thick as a wrist. The men froze. One turned toward the sound, shining his lantern into the gap they had just passed through. The light fell over the rocks, the frost, the leaning pine boughs, and a strip of red cloth tied to one of the stones. Clay's stomach tightened. That wasn't there before. None of the men spoke. None had to. It was a marker, not for them, for the Rowans. A short distance uphill, Mercy Rowan watched the men from between 2 birches. She didn't chase. She tracked, reading their panic the way her brothers read tracks. Their footsteps were louder now, erratic, careless. They were burning energy the forest would never return to them. Jeb Rowan crouched beside her, fingers resting lightly on the soil. "They're splitting." "Good," Mercy whispered. Elias and Ruthven moved parallel to the men, never breaking silence, never stepping into lantern light. Their parents stayed farther back, guiding the larger perimeter, the outer ring that trapped every possible escape route. Mercy brushed frost from her sleeve, revealing the red cloth tied around her wrist. "It's time." Her father nodded once, the motion small but absolute. The Rowans vanished into the trees. Down below, the ridge forked. The men didn't notice until they were already divided. 3 veered left, slipping along a steep incline covered in slick pine needles. 4 followed Clay to the right, plunging toward what sounded like running water. The last 2 slowed, confused, turning in circles as fog rolled in from the north, thick and sudden. "Where the hell did this come from?" one of them gasped. No one answered because no one could explain how fog appeared on a clear night at this altitude. It crawled along the forest floor like something alive, curling around boots, softening every footstep, swallowing every breath. The two men tried to call out to the others, but the fog stole their voices, not in volume, but in reach. Their shouts sounded muffled, as if buried in snow. Then, faintly, one man heard tapping, tap, tap, tap. But this time, it wasn't all around them. It came from a single direction, behind. He turned slowly. A small figure stood just beyond the curtain of fog, still, silent, waiting. The man lifted his lantern. The figure stepped back, then to the side, then disappeared behind a tree. "Did you see?" he began, but his companion was already running. Clay's group reached the sound of rushing water, a narrow creek swollen with meltwater cutting across the ravine. The bridge that once crossed it had rotted away years ago, leaving only a thin beam of splintered wood. Clay steadied himself, trying to gather the pieces of command he had left. "We cross," he said, "one at a time." But one man shook his head. "No, we go back. We find the others." Clay grabbed his collar. "You go back. You die. We cross." The decision lingered for a fraction of a second, long enough for a stone to skip across the creek. Not fall, skip, like someone had flicked it with perfect aim. The men snapped toward the source. Only trees, only darkness. "Move!" Clay hissed. They crossed, but the last man slipped. His boots skidded on the wet beam, and he plunged into the icy water with a choked scream. Clay and another man hauled him out, but his teeth were rattling, his fingers already numb. "Help me walk!" He didn't get to finish. A second stone whizzed past them, hitting a nearby tree with a sharp, deliberate crack. The sound bounced down the ravine like a signal. The men ran. They didn't notice the faint cluster of footprints on the opposite bank, prints too small to belong to any of them, arranged in a half-circle pattern, a formation. Farther south along the ridge, the three men who had split left hurried into a dense patch of laurel thickets. Their lantern flickered with every step, barely illuminating the tangle of branches clawing at their coats. "Where's the trail?" one asked. "It should be right." He stopped. The lantern beam had hit something, another strip of red cloth, tied to a laurel branch at eye level. The man swallowed. "They're marking everywhere we go." "No," another said, voice trembling. "They're marking everywhere they want us to go." Then the tapping began again, but this time faster, sharper, like the countdown to something inevitable. Tap, 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 tap. The three men backed away. Behind them, a shadow shifted, a Rowan brother, a silhouette gliding between trunks, careful not to step inside the lantern beam. The men stumbled backward, branches whipping against their faces. One tripped, crashing into a fallen log. The tapping stopped. Then a whisper drifted through the thicket, the same voice that had chilled every man in the clearing, Mercy Rowan. "You're on the wrong trail." The men bolted. None of them noticed that the whisper came from above them, not the side. Back on the main ridge, Clay Murdoch and the men with him slowed to a crawl. Every breath hurt, every muscle screamed, every instinct told them the Rowan family was closing in. Clay wiped frost from his beard. "We keep moving," he said, but the forest disagreed. A figure stepped onto the path ahead, small, unmoving, blocking their way. Lantern light washed over the shape. It didn't run. It only raised its hand as if telling them to stop. Clay froze. The figure stood alone, unarmed, calm. But the forest behind Clay shifted, branches creaking, thickets parting. The Rowan brothers had arrived, and the mountain closed behind them like a fist. The figure blocking the path didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even lean into the lantern light. Clay Murdoch felt his throat tighten as the flame revealed the outline more clearly. A young Rowan brother, Ruthven, small in stature but standing with a steadiness that suggested the forest itself held him upright. "Don't!" Clay whispered to the men behind him, but none of them needed the warning. Ruthven took a single step forward, his boots making no sound on the frost. With one hand, he pointed down the narrow trail behind him, not in threat, but in instruction, a direction, a command. Clay shook his head. "We're not—" Before he could finish, the forest behind them exhaled. Branches cracked, needles rustled, boots shifted, small, coordinated, closing the gap. The Rowan brothers had formed a semicircle around Clay's group, far enough to remain shadows, close enough for Clay to feel them breathing. "We move," Clay whispered. "Now." He pushed past Ruthven, refusing to take the direction offered. The other men followed, skirting the figure with wide, terrified arcs. Ruthven did not chase. He simply pivoted slightly, watching them pass, eyes calm, measured. Once they moved beyond him, he slipped back into the trees, disappearing so quietly, the lantern flame didn't even flicker. The men ran until their legs trembled, until the cold sliced their lungs, until the tapping started again. Not behind, not ahead, but above. Tap, 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 tap. Clay didn't dare look up. He kept moving. North of the ridge, fog clung to the ground, like a living skin. The two men lost in it stumbled blindly through the whiteness, waving their lantern through the air as if trying to cut a path with flame alone. "Where is everyone?" one of them gasped, but his voice felt dampened, swallowed. "Just keep walking," the other said, though his voice cracked. The tapping resumed, faint at first, then louder. But the fog made direction impossible. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Tap, tap, tap. The older of the two froze. That's not an echo. A shadow moved within the fog, short, deliberate, pacing parallel to them. Each time they turned, it shifted places. Each time the lantern beam swept across the mist, the figure dissolved. "We're going in circles," one whispered. The other shook his head. "No, they're circling us." The tapping quickened. The men bolted. They didn't see the faint red cloth tied to the cedar they passed, proof they had run through the same patch of fog 3 times. Meanwhile, the 3 men lost in the laurel thicket clawed through the branches, breath ragged, eyes darting. The whisper from Mercy Rowan still echoed in their skulls. "You're on the wrong trail." One of the men, Ellis Grant, stopped suddenly. "Listen." The others froze. At first, all they heard was the distant hiss of wind through leaves. Then, footsteps, light, coordinated, multiple, coming from behind, then ahead, then from the sides. The men tightened into a small triangle, lantern shaking between them. "They're not chasing," Ellis whispered. "They're steering us." But toward what? A branch above them bowed. Something, or someone, shifted its weight there. Ellis lifted the lantern toward the canopy. A face appeared in the branches. Mercy Rowan, perched silently, one arm wrapped around the trunk, watching them with the same calm she had inside the tavern. The lantern glow caught the red cloth on her wrist, and for a moment the forest reflected that color, a mute warning suspended in the air. The men stumbled backward. Mercy didn't follow. She whispered only 2 words, "This way." The men turned and ran in the direction opposite her command, straight into the darkest part of the thicket. Mercy dropped from the branches, landing without a sound, and slipped after them, not chasing, but ensuring the path closed behind them, funneling them deeper into terrain only the Rowans understood. Clay Murdoch's group pushed through dense undergrowth until the trail widened again, opening onto a slope scattered with fallen trees. Clay tried to slow, motioning for silence. Something about this part of the forest felt wrong. The air was too still, the cold was too sharp. The moonlight barely touched the ground. "We need to regroup," one man whispered. "Find the others." "We don't have time," Clay hissed. "We keep—" A stone clicked against wood nearby. Clay spun. A small figure crouched atop a fallen log, just at the edge of sight. Jeb Rowan. He rose slowly, not aggressive, not frantic, simply present, assessing them with miner's eyes that had adjusted to darkness long before any lantern could aid him. Clay lifted the lantern, and Jeb's face sharpened into view, not hardened by anger, but shaped by focus. The same focus a miner uses in tunnels where one wrong breath could collapse the earth. Jeb tapped the log once with his knuckles. Tap. The forest answered with 2 taps behind Clay's group. Tap, tap. A signal, a formation. Clay's breath caught. "They're surrounding us." Another Rowan brother stepped into view on the right, another on the left, one behind, each small, silent, steady. The men tightened behind Clay. "What do we do?" one whispered. Clay swallowed hard. "We break the circle." He picked a direction, any direction, and charged. He didn't get 3 steps before a voice met him in the darkness ahead. "Stop." Mercy Rowan stepped into the open, emerging from the slope as if she'd risen from the soil itself. Her breath didn't fog, her pulse didn't show. Her presence alone made the men freeze mid-stride. "You should have taken the trail," she said. Her voice wasn't mocking, it wasn't angry, it was simply true, a fact delivered like a final checkpoint. Clay's hand trembled. "We're leaving this forest," he hissed. Mercy tilted her head slightly. "You already have." The men looked around. They didn't recognize the terrain. They didn't see the path they'd taken. The forest behind them had rearranged itself, or so it felt. Mercy took one small step forward, and the Rowan brothers closed the circle, silent, complete, unbreakable. The mountain had chosen where this night would end. For a long moment, neither the 9 men nor the Rowan family moved. The lantern flame shook in Clay Murdoch's hand, bending and straightening like a living thing caught between terror and wind. Around him, the Rowan brothers held their positions, small silhouettes carved into the frozen earth, one at each point of the circle, each steady, each patient. Mercy Rowan stood at the center gap, the only place where escape seemed possible. She didn't block it. She simply existed there, calm as snowfall, her red cloth bracelet brushing the cold air. "You're trapped," one man whispered behind Clay. Mercy shook her head gently. "No, you're found." The words didn't rise above the breeze, but they struck deeper than any shout. Clay's chest tightened. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like a verdict. He took one step forward. Mercy did not retreat. Behind him, one of the men murmured, "We can talk. We can—" A branch snapped to their left, followed by the unmistakable rhythm of tapping. Tap, 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 tap. A reply answered from the right, then another from behind, and one more from somewhere above, carried through the canopy. It was a pattern, symmetrical, intentional, the same kind miners used to communicate in caves, and it meant the same thing it always meant. The passage is sealed. Clay's breath shook. "We're not dying out here." Mercy stepped closer, her boots crunching once against the frost. "No one said you were." Her voice was steady, but something beneath it, something older, something belonging to the mountain rather than to her, made every man take half a step back. She scanned their faces, memorizing each one, not with hatred, not with rage, with a kind of cold recognition. "You crossed the ridge," she said. "You crossed the tavern, and you crossed a line you didn't see." Jeb Rowan tapped the fallen log beside him again. Slow, deliberate, tap. Another answered behind Clay. Tap. A third answered from the trees. Tap. A fourth. Tap. Clay forced himself to breathe. He didn't understand the code, but he understood what it meant. They were no longer 9 men in a forest. They were 9 men inside a Rowan operation. The same coordination that kept miners alive underground. The Rowan family now used above ground. "We didn't mean—" one man started, voice cracking. Mercy cut him off softly. "Intent doesn't change impact." The Rowan mother stepped out from the trees then, carrying the leather pouch, the one they'd all noticed but never seen opened. She untied it with slow fingers, removing a short wooden object carved with symbols and covered with a thin rope. A marker, a boundary tool, a relic of the mountains. Clay felt his legs weaken. "Please," one of his men whispered. "We're sorry." Mercy's eyes didn't narrow. They didn't warm either. "This forest doesn't answer to apologies," she said. "It answers to balance." Her father approached from the shadows, tall for a Rowan, wide-shouldered, carrying decades of quiet labor in the shape of his spine. He studied Clay for a long moment. Then he spoke a single sentence. "You chose the hard way." Clay swallowed hard. "There's another way?" Mercy nodded. There always was. Before Clay could ask what that meant, the Rowan brothers moved, not inward, not in attack, but outward, widening the circle, creating a corridor behind Clay's group as if opening a path. Clay stared at it, confused. Mercy gestured toward the opening. "Go." The men hesitated. It looked too easy, too deliberate, too much like bait. Mercy read the doubt on their faces. "You're not being hunted," she said. "You're being escorted." Clay's voice cracked. "Escorted where?" Her answer was gentle, but the cold carried it like a blade. "Out, down the mountain, past the boundary you crossed." The Rowan father added, "If you can manage to follow." The implication was clear. The forest itself was not safe. The Rowans were the only reason there was a path at all. Clay didn't wait for a second offer. He bolted toward the opening. The other men followed, stumbling, slipping, gasping. The Rowans did not chase. They did not block. They only tracked the group from the flanks, tapping occasionally, signals to each other to maintain the perimeter. Tap, 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 like shepherds guiding panicked animals out of a canyon. The forest thickened, the cold sharpened, the fog deepened. At one point, Clay veered the wrong way, but a single Rowan brother stepped into view, shook his head once and pointed left. They continued. When one man tripped on a rock and cried out, Mercy appeared from nowhere, looked at him for a heartbeat, then motioned him forward. Not a rescue, not mercy, a reminder. Keep moving. The forest thinned, the wind grew warmer, the slope gentled, and then Clay saw it. A broken fence, a rusted mailbox, the faint outline of the old road that led back to Timberline. Civilization, escape, survival. He turned back once. The Rowans stood at the tree line, perfectly still, watching him. No weapons, no cruelty, just the mountain's judgment embodied in 5 small silhouettes. Mercy lifted her hand, not in farewell, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement of a line redrawn. Clay lowered his eyes. He and the surviving men stumbled the last stretch alone, feet hitting the dirt road with the clumsy relief of people waking from a nightmare they didn't fully understand. When they looked back again, the forest was empty. The Rowans were gone. Only the tapping remained far inside the ridge, echoing faintly like a warning. Tap, tap, tap. Not a threat, a reminder. Some jokes cost more than breath. Some mountains remember everything.